good, everybody? Take it easy back here with another NBA trade deadline video. The news dropped yesterday that it sounds like the Bucks are finally going to actually listen to Giannis' offers. That is the kind of seismic move that's going to determine a lot in the trade deadline. It seems like everyone's kind of held off, um, hoping that they can get Giannis, not wanting to disrupt their assets to get Giannis. So I think we're going to get this major domino here at the trade deadline because I think this is every team's going to be moving to get this guy, which should help everything else trickle out. So let's do Giannis as a big, his own video. He's the big prize of the deadline. Not necessarily going to help you this year. He's been injured a lot this year, whether that's frustration and legit injuries or not. I think because the contract is $54 million, even if he is healthy and 100%, the amount you're gonna have to trade to get him makes it really tough. So my team is the Timberwolves. They are oddly kind of rumored to be one of the teams in on Giannis. So I've put together a couple trades. So let's talk about Minnesota first, and then we'll go through some of the other teams. So the one thing that really made this seem like it's possible is there a rumor that came out today about trading Jaden McDaniels to the Blazers for Drew Holiday and the two Bucks picks backs. I think they would unswap them, not necessarily give you both the Portland half and the Milwaukee half. I'm not sure the technicality on how that works, but you get the swap rights to those two picks. Minnesota has their draft picks sort of in those drafts. They've traded the 2030 as a swap, but maybe you could just absorb the swap rights. Portland would keep the rights to their own pick. So those are two major assets. You would give up all your young guys, Baron J, Rob Dillon, and Terrence Shannon. I also throw in Rocco Sakari just because I think you would take the Antetokounmpo brothers back. So Alex is on a two-way, so I included their best two-way player, which was their second-round pick this year. They get Giannis back. And then the other major piece, I think, is you want to acquire more assets, and you also have to shed more salary than just Jaden McDaniels. So I was shopping Rudy Gobert. What's a team that could use a defensive center or a potential center upgrade? I landed on the Phoenix Suns, which was a nice one. They could ship Jalen Green to the Bucks, and they could ship this 2027 pick that they got from Utah last year, which is the worst of Utah, Cleveland, Minnesota. It's not a super great pick, but it is something that kind of moves the needle a bit. I had them flip Grayson Allen, so they would need to create a bit more money in this scenario. I think I had a cleaner version of this, but whatever. We'll just use this one. So I had them ship Grayson Allen to Minnesota, and then they get Bobby Portis back from the Suns, which just alleviates a bit of money for them. Oh, I think this might be the cleaner version. So it's kind of like bad contract for bad contract. It's not great, but Phoenix, they would actually end up kind of being a little guard short after this trade. So maybe something they wouldn't necessarily love to do, but they actually get slightly less toxic contract. Grayson Allen might be a better player than Bobby Portis this time, but it's more so a wash where they get $3 million of relief each year. And then I had them send Nick Richards to Minnesota to get Cole Anthony back, just to give them a little bit more guard help, because they would have Portis, Rudy Gobert, Mark Williams, and then their first-round pick, Malonk. So they wouldn't need Nick Richards. So that gets them even more tax relief. So they have to give up Jalen Green and Grayson Allen, and this pick that's probably like 25th to 30th pick. They get Rudy Gobert to solidify their defense and that playoff push. I think that makes a lot of sense for them. They would stay at 14 players. Now they have $4 million in tax space to add a 15th guy, so they could potentially get a buyout guard. The rest of the Blazers package here, I had them take on Kyle Kuzma and flip Jeremy Grant to the Bucks, so they get out of a year of Jeremy Grant, and they save about $10 million on that next year. And then since they are trading Drew Holiday, who's really the only healthy point guard on their team, they get Mike Conley and Javon Carter back to kind of handle their backcourt this season as they make a playoff push. Both those are expiring, and then next year, Scoot Henderson and Dame Lillard should be healthy to replace them. So they're giving up two fairly attractive picks with Milwaukee, but they're getting Jaden McDaniels, who I think is the Timberwolves' second best player. So I think that's worth the price there. I think it's worth the price for the Suns, and then the third team that's getting Julius Randle is the Bulls. They are just trading that Portland pick that's lottery protected, so it's probably going to be in the teens, whether that's this year, next year, 2 years from now. It's probably somewhere 16, 17, 18, something like that is where that'll end up. They get out of the Patrick Williams contract, and then they throw in just the minimum Javon Carter kind of deals. They take back Blake Wesley just because Portland's going to have to cut a guy. He's like a 22-year-old guard that's bounced around. So he just fills the 15th role. They don't necessarily have to take him back. Portland could just waive him. Portland would be $6 million in tax space, so they can afford to keep 2.2. Just waive that guy. That's all kind of semantics. Kind of the same thing here with Cole Anthony. The Suns didn't want him. The Bucks could just waive him. So then we'll do the Timberwolves. Let's do the Timberwolves first since we're talking about the Bucks. So not only do they get Giannis, they get Drew Holiday, who he likes. They get Grayson Allen, who can be a rotation piece. He's only a 6'4" guard, but he kind of plays up. He's used to playing up on the Suns. They get Nick Richards to be their new backup big. Nas Reed would bump into the front court. Giannis would probably be the center. Nas might technically start at center, but Giannis would be the actual starting center. And then you would have Drew Holiday, Ant, and DiVincenzo as the three starters. So you would start three guards, two bigs. But I think Ant can play small forward. And Drew Holiday's gotten older, so he's kind of more of a guard defender or a wing defender than a guard anyway. You would get Gary Trent back just because the Bucks don't need him. Give you a shooter off the bench, which is nice. So you would have Bones, Gary Clark, Grayson Allen, Nick Richards. I threw in Duop Reith here from Portland. Not necessarily a guy they would need to include. I needed them to take the Javon Carter contract just to make everything work. I thought that made it the cleanest, and they don't necessarily need Reith because they would have Time Lord still, and then they would have the tall white boy that I'm blanking on his name. And then they have the Yang Hassan as well in the G League. So I don't think they really need Reith. He would be much needed size on the Wolves, giving them a big floor spacer. Because Thanasis Antetokounmpo's not going to play. So Bones, Gary Trent, Jalen Clark, Grayson Allen, Nick Richards, Duop Reith. You would hope those six could turn into your three in the playoff rotation. So you get much shallower if you're Minnesota, but you have two of the five best players in the league, Giannis and Ant, so that's a risk worth taking. Then the Bucks take on a couple undesirable salaries, but nothing that really hurts them because they're dumping so much as well. So they're dumping their big three salaries in Giannis, Portis, and Kuzma, bringing back Jalen Green, Jeremy Grant, Pat Williams. It's less money overall. Pat Williams and Jalen Green are still young, so they're somewhat of prospects. Pat Williams, much less so. But it doesn't hurt for them to try to develop him. They get Rob Dillingham, who was the 8th pick last year. Berenger, who's shown a lot of flashes this year as the 17th pick rookie. Their potential future center, big of the future. Terrence Shannon, who's an older sophomore player, but still technically young. And then they would get their 2 first-round picks backs, not being swaps. They would get 2 first-rounders whenever this Portland pick conveys in this 27, late first. And then they would also get 3 of Minnesota's swaps, the 3 swaps that they can give. Those are only 3 picks they control. Minnesota also has a 26 pick, but Milwaukee wouldn't have one, so they couldn't throw the swap on that. I think this is actually a decent haul for the Bucks. Jalen Green was the prize in the KD trade, so they get that same guy back. Dillingham and Berenger, I think, have potential. Berenger's shown the flashes. Dillingham really hasn't. Neither is Terrence Shannon. But they don't got a whole lot to lose in trying to develop those guys. And then Patrick Williams is someone the Bulls saw nothing to give 4 years, $18 million a year. By all intents, he doesn't really have it. but they can keep playing him and see if they can find anything in him. And then Jeremy Grant is a decent vet. They would have him for 2 years, and then in 2027/2028, he would be an expiring that they can maybe shop for other pieces. And then Rocco Zakarski was the Wolves' second round pick. He's really big. He's more like an old school big. Not sure how many skills he has. He hasn't played a second for the Wolves this year. He's just been in Iowa. But it's a lottery piece. I think that's essentially the best offer the Wolves could do for Giannis, which I don't think is the best they could do. So the other team I think that is primed is the Heat. The Heat could I think they would send Tyler Hero. So I think one of the Heat's conundrums is I don't think it makes sense to pay Norm Powell and Tyler Hero. They're basically the exact same player. Norm Powell's 6 years older, so I think Hero would have some value here. They could send Terry Rozier's expiring. They could send Kalani Ware. They have Fontecchio's expiring. They could send their first round pick this year, Chakachunas. I think they would be willing to send all of that. They could send Nikola Jovic too if they wanted. I guess he's still only 22. So let's just send him just to see what all we can package together. They could take Kuzma back. They could probably take Porter back, maybe not. Let's see, their best two-way guy is probably this guy. You get the Antetokounmpos. And where are we at? They got to take 3 more players. They only got 1.5 tax space, so they're gonna have to go into the tax, but probably would like that tax to be as low as possible. I'll send Gary Trenther again because the Bucks don't need to compete, so they don't need them. That puts them over the tax. So they maybe have to throw in Davion Mitchell here too, which means maybe they just take Fontecchio out just so it's less complicated. And then every pick that's not nailed down. So it looks like they would swap 28, give them 29, swap 30, give them 31, and swap 32. So the Bucks here will get Tyler Hero, Davion Mitchell, Nikola Jovic, Kalani Ware, Yaka Jonas, 2 firsts and 3 swaps. So I think that package is a little better than the Wolves package. They don't clear all their money, but that's not really a big deal. They're not dying to clear Bobby Portis. I don't think that really hurts them at all to have Bobby Portis. Payroll's only $143 million next year. And so they got a lot of room to do stuff. They would have 3 guys, 22 and younger, that they're getting from the Heat. Davion Mitchell, who's could maybe turn into something interesting. He would be an expiring next year, so maybe you could flip him next year for more. Same with Tyler Hero. Tyler Hero would kind of be your billboard guy now. It's a lot of guards because you still have Ryan Rollins, Kevin Porter, AJ Green, so you're very guard heavy. Your rotation doesn't make a lot of sense. But you would at least have a draft pick in every draft now. Give you a little bit more hope. You would hope one of these young guys could hit. And then you would have Giannis and Bam as your front court, very defensive front court, not a lot of shooting. But you would have shooting in Wiggins, Norm Powell, Kuzma, if he can give you anything. Then you got Gary Trent and Cole Anthony on the bench as well. Not a great shooting team, but they should be pretty dynamic defensively. Another team is the Warriors. The Warriors seems like they would be willing to give up everything for Giannis, especially with the Jimmy injury. So let's throw all 3 Antetokounmpos on there to start. Jimmy Butler, Kuminga, Buddy Hield. Shows us a 3-year deal. It's actually an expiring deal because it's non-guaranteed next year. And I think a team option in the 3rd year. So that's decent expiring. Moses Moody's 23. Give him pods. And then they would need lottery or a two-way guy. This guy has no details, so we'll send up him. I don't show who's the best. They like Pat Spencer. I didn't realize Pat Spencer's already 29, so that's not ideal. We got 6 guys coming out, so they would need 3 back. They're in the tax space here, so they would need to take Kuzma back. They probably need to take Bobby Portis back. Yeah, and they still have room here. They can take Gary Trent. That looks pretty even there. Milwaukee stays under the tax, which is nice. That's what they want. Let's see. So they don't have their 30, which means they can't trade 29, 27. So they would trade 26. They would trade 28. They could swap 27. They can't swap 29. Milwaukee doesn't have that one. They could swap 32, and then give them 32. Or swap 31, give them 32. So I think this is the ideal package for the Bucks. You get Jimmy Butler, just a massive expiring deal that doesn't really matter to you. You get Kuminga, whatever he can give you, Moody and Bajemski. You get 3 first and 2 swaps. The 30, the 28, and the 32 should be pretty good picks. They would still have Giannis, but they would no longer have Curry at that point, most likely. So who knows if Giannis could even extend with Draymond and Curry aging out. This is a really old roster. They're trading everyone for Giannis. So I don't know that Giannis would extend, but they're just chasing one more title. So those late Warriors picks are valuable. And then that 26 one is probably going to be in the teens this year as well. So I think you're getting the best draft compensation. And then Podziemski's never going to be a star, but he's a decent young player.
Kuminga, you can figure out what he's got. You're not really hurting anything there. You're at 167 with the Jimmy Butler contract next year. So you're clear of the tax. Don't have a lot of room to do other stuff, but that's not a concern because you're not going to compete with this team anyway. I think those are the main 3 teams. Oh, and then you have the Knicks. And the Knicks are messy just like the Timberwolves are because they don't have real assets. They would have to trade these guys to secondary teams to get the assets. So does that work just as is? No, it doesn't. They're taking on too much money. Oh yeah, because they would have to kick back probably Kuzma. And then the Knicks would trade Yabusele. And then that should work legally. Bridges can't be traded until Feb 1, but that's 3 days before the deadline, so that's no big deal. That's our only. So this would be the base of the package, but then Towns and Bridges would go elsewhere, and you could pick similar to the Minnesota situation. And then the Knicks would also include from their repertoire. They have this protected Washington pick that's not going to convey and just become second rounders, but they give them that just to give it to them as an asset, and then they have these 3 swaps. So not much the Knicks have here. So I think the Knicks actually have a less attractive package than Minnesota. The hope is you could trade Bridges to Portland in the same situation where Minnesota trades Jaden to Portland. You get Drew Holiday back to the Knicks, which is going to hurt them cap-wise. So you would also have to send Kuzma there. And they're still over the tax, the second apron. They would have room to take Jeremy Grant. They're over now too, so see, it starts getting really messy. So you could trade maybe Mikal Bridges there, just to create the space. And they are 7.8. They got to shed a little bit, so they just sit. And that creates tax space. So then you have that. And that should just be Bridges still. Yep. So then you would get the 2 Milwaukee picks back to the Bucks here as well. 6:30. So Portland would get Mikal Bridges, they would swap Jeremy Grant for Kyle Kuzma, and they would take Mitchell Robinson's contract just because someone has to take it. The Bucks would get their 2 28 30 picks back, as well as the 3 Knicks swaps. No young assets. They have to take Jeremy Grant, and then they still have to flip Towns. So whatever else you can get for Towns, that's the same situation here. I would probably go the Bulls on this, just because Phoenix wouldn't have the space for it. So you can do the same thing we did before. You get Pat Williams, send them Zach Collins, send them Javon Carter. They need to take 3 guys back. Yeah, so we're going to send them Dalton Terry as well. And then they have space, so they could take Mitchell Robinson here. That's probably a little more attractive for them. So Mitchell Robinson to the Bucks and Javon Carter to the Blazers. Okay, and then the Bucks, the Bulls would need 3 guys. They get Gary Trent, and then you get probably Taurean Prince, and they can't afford to take a 3rd guy here. And then same thing, they'd get the Portland pick. And maybe they would get the Bulls 26 here as well. So then the Bulls would actually get a 26 pick out of all this. She should be in the same situation there. The Blazers have too many guys now. But the Bulls don't have space. So the Blazers would have to cut Dupree here or Blake Wesley. They would probably just cut Blake Wesley. That's no big deal. So then the Bulls get Karl Anthony Towns for 2 firsts and dumping Patrick Williams' contract. You're not giving up a whole lot else. So the Bucks would end up here now. They would have 4. They would get 2 picks, control of their 2 picks, and 3 swaps. So even still, putting all this together, I think it's not quite as attractive as the Minnesota offer or the Miami or Golden State offer. So while Giannis might want to go to the Knicks, I think that's kind of the worst option for the Bucks. And let's see if I can come up with any wildcard teams here before we end the video. Cavs is tough to pull off. I might have one on my profile. I made one for Adam on the Discord, so we can try to look at that if I can find it. I had one where Towns went to Orlando. I had one where Towns went to the Spurs. Same kind of situation still on those. It doesn't look like I saved the Cavs one. Boston doesn't have the assets. Detroit would have the assets. That's just kind of weird for them. I don't think that's something they would do. They're very early in their development to push all the chips in. The Spurs are worth talking about, so let's do the Spurs. You got the 3 Antetokounmpos. The Spurs have a lot of expirings, so they could send Harrison Barnes, Keldon Johnson, Kelly Olynyk, Jeremy Sochan. I think that's enough money just as is like that. And then they would have to take one more guy back. We'll just do Coffee because he's right there. And then they could send this Atlanta pick. They could send, or no, they would probably keep that. So they could send the 27 Atlanta pick. They could, the swap rights don't mean anything there. They could put the swap rights on this. So the Bucks would get the best of essentially probably Portland's pick, Boston's pick, Spurs pick. That's not that great, but it's something. They get the 29 Spurs pick. They get this swap that's between Dallas and Minnesota. And they get this 31st pick. And we'll throw the swap in here for the 32 as well. This is actually a pretty decent trade for the Bucks all in all. So they would get 3 firsts and 3 swaps. They would get Jeremy Sochan to see if there's anything they can get out of him. Keldon Johnson, decent rotation guy. He's not really going to set the world on fire for them. So they would at least have a pick every year. They still have the Kuzma contract, but that expires next year. And they still have the Bobby Portis contract, but that's not a killer, all the way down to 114, so they could be a dumping ground team that have plenty of cap space next year. Ideally, you would obviously want Harper or Stephen Castle, especially if Minnesota's given up as much as they can. This isn't necessarily the Spurs' best offer, but it's something they could offer pretty easily. And then you just pair Giannis with Wemby. Still have De'Aaron Fox, still have Vassell, Dylan Harper, Stephon Castle. This team would be really scary. And I think this is the ideal package the Spurs want to do. I'm sure they would bite, including Vassell, but that doesn't change a whole lot for the Bucks either. But this is a decent return for Giannis. A lot of these picks probably aren't going to hit because none of them are really going to be actual lottery picks is the problem. But it gives you at least some assets back. But I think other teams would be more desperate than the Spurs. I don't know that the Spurs would give up more than this. The Rockets have decent picks. It'd be hard for them to cobble together the salaries here. So they have their two dead players, Steven Adams, Fred VanVleet, Giannis. Throw all the Antetokounmpos in there. They would still have to shed about $5 million here, so they would probably also have to throw in Dorian Finney-Smith. Or no, they would throw in Tari Eason and probably Jabari. Would probably have to be included in that. And then one of these guys, doesn't really matter which. And so that's 5, so then you just get 2 minimums back. Gary Trent, Bob, like that. And this is Brooklyn's pick. That's a pretty decent pick. They would still have Phoenix's pick, so they can also include the 28, just like that. They wouldn't be able to swap the 29, so maybe they give up the 29 and keep the 28. I can do it that way. They gave up the 29, the 30 could be a swap, the 28 could be a swap. They could give up 31. They go all the way in here. Let's just look at what all the way in would look like here. They are just a smidge over. Okay. That would just mean they don't take coffee on. Now they gotta get all the way under the first. Okay. So we'll just throw Capella in there too. And then they could take on Jericho Sims. They get a big back, and they're under the first 8 bring. All right, so that would work. So this is actually a decent package here for the Bucks as well. So they get the Brooklyn 27 pick. That's probably the best pick they've traded. 29 pick that's got some swap rights attached to it. I think Houston will get the best of Phoenix, Dallas, and their own. At least Phoenix and their own, which is decent. And then the 31st Phoenix pick, which by that point Giannis and KD are probably gone, so that might be valuable. 3 swaps as well. You also get Jabari and Tari Eason. You have to take on a little bit of dead money, Steven Adams, Clint Capella, Fred VanVleet. But that's not going to kill you if you're the Bucks, because you're at least getting decent young players. This one you're up to 158, and you got to play Tari Eason. Jabari's extension kicks in, so you're up against it a little bit there. But I think you could probably shop Capella. You could probably shop Steven Adams, just because there's not a lot of bigs in the league. Fred VanVleet might opt out of this. He'll be 32, probably looking to compete. Probably can't get 25 on the open market, but he might want to just play on a winner. You could also maybe trade him to a winner. So there would be ways out of that for the Bucks, and 158's not terrible. They would still be able to navigate being a tax team there. The Rockets would have KD, Giannis, Şengün, Reed Shepard, and Amon Townsend. So this would look pretty good. So I wouldn't count Houston out here. It's very front-loaded. They're stars and scrubs essentially team, but they would have a lot of star power on that team. All right, I think that covers everyone. Thanks, guys. Next video, final video, will be the buyers. We'll cover all the teams that are going to make the playoffs.